Good morning. Welcome to our third installment of the Upjohn Presidential Seminar Series. And welcome both to our in-person and our virtual attendees. So I'm excited to welcome today's speaker, Randy Eberts. As most of you know, Randy was president of the Upjohn Institute for 26 years. I don't know, I didn't actually do quite the calculation, but 26, right? From 1993 to 2019. And after stepping down from his long and distinguished career leading the organization, he has also continued serving as a senior researcher, a role that he also occupied while he was president. I actually met Randy years ago in a different role, right? When he succeeded me as the senior labor economist of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. And then in a twist of fate, when I came here, I succeeded Randy. So we're kind of like bookends. Prior to joining the Institute, Randy also served as the assistant vice president and head of the regional and applied micro group at the Cleveland Fed. His career has notably included a rich history of working on various aspects of workforce development programs, the workforce development system, with a particular emphasis on finding ways to improve the delivery of services to help people find jobs. He is going to be talking about that research today. The seminar will be approximately 1 hour long. Randy said he had 60 minutes worth of slides. I asked him to cut it back just a tad for some Q&A. But the seminar will include question and answers. We have a chat function, and Laura Pyle is going to be monitoring the chat. So if anyone online has a question, just submit your questions through the chat. So welcome, Randy. I look forward to your remarks.
Thank you.
Where's the answers?
Let's see. How do we get, there we go. Okay, I wanted to talk about from CETA to WIOA. Okay, CETA is happened back in 1973 for us, you know, and even before then for CETA itself. But it was something that we have, it's been a long time since CETA, and right now we're in WIOA, which is again a national program, and both of these things have really been a very good part of my research over the past I don't know how many years it's been, but maybe longer than that I've been here. Okay, let's see. So the event today gives me an opportunity to really share with you some of the most gratifying moments of my career. And the story begins in the middle of the 1990s, really, when Steve Wandner and I and Steve was at the USDOL at the time. And we were sitting down and we were mapping out some of the things that we wanted to do over, you know, the next few years. And before this story gets too far along, I want to refer to as much as what I do as we. I really do mean we here, because it's not only myself, it's Chris O'Leary, it's Steve Wandner at USDOL. It's a whole bunch of people who have really made the type of research possible that we're going to talk about today. And so let's see, without them, the story that I'm about to tell would be much shorter, much shorter, okay? And so let me start with this very brief history of CETA and the Institute. Now, in December of 1973, CETA was started really as a continuation of the manpower development what was it called? MDA?
MDTA.
MDTA, Man and Training Act. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you. I always relied on Chris, you know, for a bunch of things, and so this is one of them. But you know, at the time, we had the EMSD, okay, which was the predecessor to the CWIS, the Center for Workforce Innovation and Solutions, right? Thank you. Yeah, good. Okay. And so let me get here. Okay. And so today, CWIS includes programs such as the Employer Resource Network and neighborhood employment hubs and Pulse and Michigan Works Southwest, and all these acronyms and names of things that we're doing quite extensively right now. But back in 1970s, Earl Wright, who was the third executive director for the Institute, was negotiating with the county of Kalamazoo about how the Institute might help the county with CETA services, okay? And so even with this, the county of Kalamazoo, we also had the county of St. Joseph, who was sort of a, kind of, something that went along with it, okay, but the two of them together was about 250,000 people living in these two counties at the time, okay, and that meant that when we actually expanded our reach to a 4-county area, that it was something less than what we had even at that time. Now, after CETA, there was the JTPA, of course, which was from 1982 to 1998. And then we had the WIA, the Workforce Investment Act, which was 1998 to 2014. And then we had the WIOA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And that was, this was from 2014 to the present, basically, okay? And but sometime in all this, Governor Snyder, who was our Republican governor at the time, in 2015, he decided that we should really have just 10 basic regions of the state, okay? And here on the right, I have the regions that he envisioned himself, okay? We didn't quite get down to that when we started whittling down the 26 or so WDAs to 16 of them, but we were close. We were closer than we were before, right? Okay, and so in 2015, instead of 26, we had 16, but at the same time, this Michigan Works Southwest, which was the name that we decided upon, also included Calhoun County, which is Battle Creek, and Branch County, okay, which is Coldwater, basically. And then that was a 4-county area that had a population of about 500,000, okay? And so 500,000 pretty much doubled what we had in 1973, okay? And so, and then Ben Damerow, who was promoted as head of CWIS, and Jackie was also elevated to the executive director of Southwest Michigan, or Michigan Works Southwest, not Southwest, I got it wrong, yeah, anyway, Michigan Works Southwest, okay, that's the official name, okay, and so, instead of EMSD, we had CWIS, I can't even say the acronym, but that was what we ended up with. But for these 10 regions, you can see how they first started out with number 1, which is the UP, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we just had the 4-county area. We were looking at a 5-county area, which included Eaton County, which also was, include Berry County, right? That was Berry County, not Eaton, Berry, because it also had Hastings in it, okay, which was, but Hastings decided to go elsewhere, pretty much to the orbit of Kent County and all that, what was up there around Grand Rapids. And then Van Buren and Cass and Berrien counties were something that also went, to their respective places, okay? So, let's see. Now, what I want to do is talk about these 12 programs that I've listed here. And throughout much of what I'm going to be saying, I'm going to talk about the bonus experiments, which we all remember, or some of us remember, and then WPRS, FDSS, WorkFirst, VAPIS, Michigan FDSS, JET evaluation, Goodwill of Detroit, performance targets, behavioral insight, both here as well as in Grand Rapids, okay, so there's two of them there. And then we're gonna talk about the Career Explorer, which is basically just, you know, an FTSS that has a little bit of more modern techniques to it. Okay. So let's go to the bonus experiments first. Okay. Now the bonus experiments were, if I can get this thing. Sorry, because I was hoping I could also have just for me, not for you, the notes, but anyway, I have to print them all out. And so I have about 30 some pages of notes here that some of them have, some slides have notes, others don't. Okay, there we go. So let's see, here we go. There we are. And so let's start out with the bonus experiments. Here we have the Illinois reemployment bonus experiment, which was conducted about 1984 to 85, okay? And that's about the time that CETA, or JTPA, not CETA, JTPA was started in 1982, right? And so this is 2 or 3 years afterwards. And the Institute staff designed, oversaw, and evaluated the experiment, the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. The idea was to give a bonus to UI beneficiaries who could become reemployed sooner rather than later. The staff of the Institute was concerned about the theoretical and practical aspects of the experiment and to see whether or not it was cost effective and to whom, okay? And then Bob Spiegelman, who was our 4th executive director of the Institute, okay, I was 5th, all right, because Bob was my predecessor, or my 6th predecessor, right? Yeah, right, I got that right. And then Steve Woodbury and also Chris was also involved with the bonus experiment. But
not the Illinois, but later in Washington.
yeah, later in Washington, right? Yeah, not, and we had a couple of these, right? We had 3 of them.
Well, there was, Bob and Steve did the Illinois project.
Yeah,
We did the Washington project. And at the same time, the Pennsylvania project started. And
Pennsylvania
that
too,
was
yeah,
Mathematica, and they had also done the New Jersey project.
right,
So when Bob Spiegelman did a book, we covered all 4
okay,
of the reemployment
yeah.
bonus experiments.
yeah, right, okay.
And there's a book published by the Upjohn Institute.
I remember that book,
which-
yeah, right.
Yeah, you can get it as a
Oh.
PDF and download it online.
Yeah, right, and
Will you be selling signed copies later?
I will be on that book, yeah, because I had, and.
But thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
Randy, we were involved, deeply involved in the reemployment bonus experiment
Oh, no,
Yes.
that's fine, yeah,
Just read that.
okay, great,
that were federally funded.
okay,
And managed really by Steve Wonder out of DOL.
yeah, okay, great.
The Illinois preceded the other.
It was
3.
the other, yeah,
The other
it was
3.
the first one,
And that
right?
was done directly between Upjohn and the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
Steve can
Mhm.
explain that.
Right, yeah. And then in 1993, we had the WPRS, which is the Workforce Profiling and Reemployment Services. Now, this was basically all of Steve, right? Because it was something that he had sort of concocted himself with the help of, I guess, an intern who decided that this was part of, and this was congressionally they had the congressional legislation that mandated this, that each state had to follow this particular procedure. And the idea behind, or the purpose behind WPRS, it's a targeting mechanism really to determine which UI recipients receive the limited amounts of reemployment services, okay? But before we get to that point, I do want to say that Chris O'Leary, who's sitting right in the middle here, was a key partner in WPRS implementation and evaluation. And also that other states did not have the same expertise that we had here at the Institute. And this created some hilarious stories that I want to talk about just briefly. And it turned out that the dependent variable for one of these states was just the opposite of what people thought it would be, right? And this was a state that, you know, was, well, more recently, it's a state that we probably would like to make fun of, but still, it's a state that, instead of being 1 for benefit exhaustion, it was 0 for the same, right? And so it was very difficult to understand which way it was going, okay? Because WPRS is really the dependent variable is benefit exhaustion, I think, yeah, right? And so, that is, it's something that, is difficult to understand if you don't really understand what the dependent variable is here in this particular case. So anyway, that's one of the interesting things about it. Now, FDSS, the Frontline Decision Support System, which is probably gonna make up most of what I'm gonna talk about today, is really a way to integrate this whole bunch of WPRSs, okay? Because it's a way to really take our, the types of services that we have available through WIA and WIOA, okay? And it has a way to use this as a more integrated way of providing services in WIOA, I should say. It was a set of tools that used existing administrative data to help staff and customers make better decisions about job prospects and about appropriate services that meet the customer's needs in finding employment. Okay? And it also uses statistical methods such as regression or logit analysis to relate customer characteristics, local labor market information, past work history, and service participation to employment outcomes. So all of this, all of these things were part of that FDSS that we talk about. And it was first piloted in Georgia, but in about the turn of the century, about 2000. And I want to talk about the advocate that we had in Georgia, because we didn't have one in the state of Washington as much. And so Georgia was a very kind of unique, she was a very unique person. And it was Helen Parker. She was an associate commissioner of labor for the state. And when Helen spoke, everybody seemed to listen, okay? It wasn't that, there was no one who would really say no to Helen, okay? It was Helen, when Helen spoke, everybody listened and they kind of nodded yes, okay, instead of no to her.
I'm sorry.
There we go. Whoops. Oh, you're doing this.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
I'm trying to
I'm,
help.
I guess so. Yeah, that's great. Okay, and so what I have here is the one-stop centers, and with the one-stop centers, we have certain types of services, and these are core services, intensive services, and training services. And this was like an upside down cone, really, or a triangle, or something like that, okay? Where to fail at one, well, let me get started first, just talking about the services themselves. Okay, services were characterized by the amount of staff involvement and the extent to which customers can access the services independently. Okay, that's basically what WIA was about, okay? And core services were the least intensive and reached the most participants, and training services were considered the most intensive and reached the least number of participants, okay? So you can see how this is now a kind of an upside down triangle, right? Okay, therefore it was core, intensive, and training services in that order, okay? And so to go to the next level, that is from core to intensive, one had to fail in getting a job with only core services. So in order to move to the next level, you had to fail at the previous level, okay? So, and to get training services, which was the least, which is the most intensive, but also the least number of participants, that training services were those that, really, you had to fail at both core and intensive to get training services, okay? And what we wanted to do with FDSS was to somehow, not have this failure among the people, okay, among the participants. We wanted to have a way in which they would, instead of failing, they would, you know, provide or the services, they would get the services regardless, okay? Well, of course, you know, some of these services, like training services, are very difficult to come by. Okay, they're more intense, they're much more intensive. They aren't as prevalent as other services are. Well, with these types of services, we had two types. We had the service, the systematic job search module and the service referral module. And with the systematic job search module, we had such questions or ways in which these modules could be used at the one-stop centers in a way that they were structured so that we could ask, what's the probability of returning to prior employment or the prior industry? Labor demand in a prior occupation, likely reemployment services, suitable job vacancy listings, and related occupational algorithms. What we were trying to do really was to provide a way in which, instead of getting those dusty books off the shelf of a one-stop, okay, we would have an electronic means or a kind of a way in which people could access the same information that might be provided in these dusty books, okay? And so we had all these on the left, and then we had the employability score, a service referral, and the relative frequency of service use. Now, I'm going to be talking about these in just a moment, a little more extensively. And so, but before then, whoops, you're going to do that, okay? But before then, I have this slide that talks about Georgia was the first and most successful state to implement FDSS, okay, and that's down here at the very bottom. And then we had the state of Washington, right, which we are now using some of their information from. And the state of Washington is probably in the opposite side of the country of where Georgia might sit, but it was a good place to be. And so we constructed the modules listed in the previous slide for Georgia. And then we had a one-stop center who participated by having dislocated workers use those modules that we were constructing. But we were still only one step away from evaluating the program. And the reason that this is one step away was that this was during the great, or not the Great Recession, but the recession of 2000, basically, okay? And there were long lines at the UI offices, okay? And the commissioner of labor, who was different from Helen Parker, who was just an associate at the time, but she or he was someone who didn't want to see those long lines. And so he took the resources from FDSS and put them more in the offices of the UI folks, okay? And so the program only lasted maybe, what, 2 years, do you think? And so at most, right? And so we never got to evaluate the effectiveness of this program, even though we had some ideas on how to do this type of thing, okay? So in Washington State, however, we really didn't have a very good advocate. Unlike Helen Parker, who everyone listened to, or they wouldn't say no to, we had somebody who went back to academia for a variety of reasons. And he was an associate commissioner as well as Helen Parker was. But we also tried another advocate, and he was low enough in the bureaucratic hierarchy that he was not very effective either, at least in getting FDSS up and running, okay? And so still we had some good stories from Georgia, and we had some good quotes from Washington, the state of Washington. Okay, So let's talk about those stories from Georgia, okay? We had a bunch of people come and visit this, the FDSS and what we were trying to do there. And one group came from Denmark. And this is the Minister of Labor who came, as well as her entourage. And for a social evening, we took everyone to an Atlanta Braves baseball game, which produced at least two things. One was that first, the entourage was a little concerned about the group of guys who were sitting right in front of them, who were rooting for the other team, basically. And so I guess, they use barbed wire, chain link fence between opponents and for soccer or something like that in Denmark or something. Anyway, and so that was one of the things that we noticed about the entourage. And the other thing was the size of the beers. Boy, were they large! They exclaimed, and these were people from Denmark, even no less. And so that was kind of a tough one too. And then we had the Denmark group was also part of a workshop that we had that was really a way to explain the notion of FDSS. And in the workshop were administrators, staff, and other participants. And one of the other participants was a truck driver. Okay, he was kind of a big guy. And so it turns out that the algorithm referred to him as a hairdresser, or referred him to as a hairdresser, okay? Which it didn't sit very well with him at all. I mean, you could still tell he was kind of upset about it. And even when we were looking, at these things. But only because it was discovered that the wrong number was put in the algorithm for truck drivers. And so garbage in, garbage out, the old adage, that we hear about is applied here, of course. And what we found was that one of the things that we wanted to do was to make sure that we had the right coding done for these different occupations. Okay, then for the state of Washington, we had one quote, and the quote really came from a staff person. And the staff person said that as a caseworker, I would spend at least 30 minutes with each client inputting information that I knew was not going to be used to help my client directly, but only to fill out reports, okay? Now we have an opportunity to use this information to do a better job helping clients, right? And so this has really stuck with me for a long time. And this was about 24 years later, I guess. And so this has been something that FDSS is about. Okay, so I mentioned these tools, and we can assist the service center staff to quickly access customer needs. They can target services to meet customer needs and deliver services in an effective and efficient manner. And aid customers becoming, and also they provide aid to customers by becoming better informed about job prospects, which is really a reality check. Quickly and systematically access labor market information and services, find better job matches more quickly, determine eligibility for services, and identify services that best meet their needs. Okay. And so here are what I kind of promised you. And so these are the screens, the actual screens from our, you can see that they aren't very pretty, okay? But these are what we actually came up with. What's that?
Like Fortran or COBOL.
Oh, yeah, it's the blue screen, right? Remember the old blue screens from those times? Yeah, and so here we have the demographics of Chris Tucker, who if we put in the the social security number, that's who we come up with. It's Chris Tucker, which is 11111111111. I don't know how many ones you have there. They have there. But anyway, so that's one slide. Then the next slide is having to do with it's the part of Georgia, which is see, did we
We're gonna go back.
no, one more slide. There we go. Yep, it's Barrow County. county of employment, and we also had educational attainment and composition here, and compensation here, not composition, compensation. And then we have the probability of employment, reemployment on the next slide. Okay, and this is again for Barrow County. And we have the occupational growth and the likely reemployment earnings, okay? If they were to find a new job. And then finally, we have related occupations. Okay, and then service referral, which is kind of a different approach to things. We really grappled with this for a long time, but what we found was that the percentage of service users steadily working was probably one of the best measures of this. And so what we found was that if we were to use the UI wage records, okay, and the all the demographics that went with this, that we could then relate the percentage of service workers steadily working somehow, okay? And by doing that, we had this relative effectiveness index, which is, peaks at 1.20, and then it goes down to 1.04, then 1.03, and finally below 1, all the way down to 0.35, I guess, okay? And then, or 0, I guess, for Job Finding Club. It's not very effective, the Job Finding Club wasn't. Okay, and then finally, we had the training statistics here at the very bottom. Okay, so we can keep moving back, or keep moving on. Okay, so that was one of the programs that I was talking about. So we've had 3 now, okay? And so with the Work First program, this is another pilot that we thought we'd start. And the idea here was that we would use a pilot in the sense that what we were trying to do here was to really look at the way in which certain services were provided. Not just, we wanted to see whether or not there's any differences between a service provision by one subcontractor versus another subcontractor. And it turned out that even some of the subcontractors were told to take a hike because they didn't have the numbers that we really expected them to have. And so it was a situation in which the pilot had the employability score, which was advocated in the research literature, this guy Babcock, and it also had referrals to customers of different service providers, okay? And then within this, we also had an RCT, which is a random control trial, okay? And it uses administrative data, okay? And so those are the 3 things that the pilot was actually designed to do, okay? And here, I have some pictures later on, but here we have the pilot that was set up around 1990, or in the late 1990s, actually, at the Upjohn Institute, with funding from USDOL. It was used to, as I mentioned earlier, used to actually find ways in which it met the needs of customers to refer them to services that best meet their needs, okay? And then we demonstrate that individuals respond differently to different approaches in delivering services, and this knowledge then can be an effective program. And the benefit cost ratio of the program was about 3. And so with the random assignment, and the thing about random assignment was that the controlled trials was that, since nobody really knew what to do about, how to, distribute these individuals to the various, to various, subcontractors. What we found out was that they basically randomly, distributed these individuals to these subcontractors. And with that, instead of, one person going one place and one person going to the next place, then, we could basically then, determine that they were randomly assigned. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Whoops, I went too far. There we go. Okay, so FIA, which is the Family Independence Agency, was and what this was work first. This was not something that was from something like what we had, which is the Work First program. But this was from the MDHHS, right, which is the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. And so this was really TANF dollars that we were trying to use here. And so with that, with the TANF dollars, there was it was FIA was considered an important partner for us, at least in Michigan, an important partner for in the one stops, okay, or whatever they were called. Yeah, right, okay. And so in Michigan, we were especially it was especially important that we had these as some of our partners. Okay, and so with this, the FIA refers clients to Work First programs. And then the intake and orientation takes place twice a week at one site, and job search assistance takes place at 3 sites. And so since it was at one site, we could then, if you move on to the next slide, we could then have the intake and registration. Welfare recipients report to intake manager. FIA provides personal information prior to the intake. And so what we had was a situation in which individuals would provide the information that was necessary to, as part of their orientation, okay? And this was, part of the intake process. But this intake process was something that was it really sped up the process a lot, okay? And so missing information is highlighted and the client is asked to fill in the missing data. And so we just keep going here. Missing data entered when clients are in orientation, and most data is entered before the day of the intake. And so most of the information that we have here is entered before the clients actually get to the orientation. And so what we have then is a situation in which what am I trying to say here? That that the clients attend orientation, but by doing so that they are have most of the information here already in the intake process. Okay, so let's see. So we leave with the referral. And so once they leave the orientation, then they have a referral that most people are willing to take. We only had a few people who were not willing to go to the subcontractor that we had assigned them to. There were 3 subcontractors. Each one was, given well, each person was given a referral notice, and then they had to go to that subcontractor. Okay. Okay, so that was basically the Work First program itself, okay? And then we had the JET, the Jobs Education and Training Program, which was under the Action Network. The Institute evaluated the program in 2008 using a 2-period difference in differences approach, okay? And then Sandra Danziger headed the implementation process. I mentioned Sandra Danziger because many of you know her husband, Sheldon Danziger, okay? And he was at Russell Sage until he's retiring, I guess, right
Just a
now.
few weeks ago.
Yeah, just a few weeks ago. And in New York City, and before going to Russell Sage, he was a longtime professor at the University of Michigan. Okay, and he would be over here at times talking to us about their various things. Okay, so that's one aspect. The JET program was one evaluation that we also did. And then the Institute evaluated the Goodwill of Detroit pilot called Moving Men and Women to Economic Independence in Michigan. Now, this pilot, while it served three types of people, it was only the within reach one, which consists or assists the chronically unemployed with economically disadvantaged backgrounds. And this is the one that we evaluated as the goodwill component of this. And the evaluation used the difference in differences as well as the propensity score matching techniques. And so it used both of those types of an approach here. Okay, then VAPAS. Now, remember, VAPAS was not something that we labeled as VAPAS. No, it's something that it was the state of Michigan that came up with VAPAS, but we didn't call it VAPAS. But the Evaluated Performance Improvement System was created for the state of Michigan with support from the USDOL around the mid-2000s, right? And it adjusted performance measures of WDAs. Now, a WDA is a workforce development area, and that's the local, it's like us, okay, what we are here. And differences in personal characteristics of participants and differences in local labor market conditions. And it also developed a module to forecast the performance outcomes of WDAs so that they could have an idea of whether, they were actually doing the right thing, going in the right direction. Whether they are meeting their performance targets was primarily the thing that was going in the right direction, what I meant by that. And then also continuously improving services. And so it was both continuous improvement of services as well as making sure that we were moving in the right direction. So VAPAS is around for a number of years, and it was something that the state of Michigan, right here in this room, we had a whole bunch of people come in and we were trying to teach them how to use VAPAS. Okay. And then in 2007 and 2009, which was the time of the Great Recession, right? We decided that, it was, they asked the Institute, that is the US Department of Labor asked the Institute, to do something that was like JTPA, but something more sophisticated than JTPA. And that was to use more modern data and approaches that would encourage continuous improvement among targets without discouraging people from looking for jobs. Okay, so let me read that again. It's continuous improvement among targets without discouraging people from looking for jobs. One of the things that during the Great Recession was that people really weren't excited about having a job, okay? They, and so looking for a job was something that was a little, well, kind of difficult for some people. Well, with the help of Tim Bartik and Wang, we designed a way to use the individual participant data from something called Wizard. Now, Wizard is it's the WIOA, which is the first three letters, and then it's a standard record database to do just that. Okay, it's a way in which the reemployment data, that is the earnings and the wage data and all that are matched with the data that come from the administrative data. And so it's not only a way in which it's a way in which to use both its individuals as well as and the Wizard data is something that is very, very important for what we've done here at the Institute. So we constructed national targets for 11 programs under the ETA, okay? And we also conducted workshops for states that were interested in doing some, to construct some state targets. Now, what we did here was incorporated in the WIOA bill that Congress enacted in 2014. Okay, so this was not something that was just, you know, it was not something that was just for you know, our own consumption, but something that was a kind of a big deal back in Congress, because I remember going there in Washington DC, where one of the I think it was Patty Murray, who was a senator at the time, that you know, we were concerned about you know, all of the well, what happened was that under WIA, which is not quite WIOA yet, but under WIA, they had a much more relaxed approach to setting targets at the state level and the local level. And so with WIA, we were with that relaxed approach, people really weren't, or the administrators really weren't concerned about as much about you know, setting the targets. And under JTPA, which was what I mentioned earlier, was what we did was to have a very rigorous approach to setting targets. And these approaches were based upon some type of regression analysis that our friend at the Marshall School came up with at University of Texas. He was one of the,
Oh, I thought it was Kathy Dickinson and Rich West that.
well, not so, it was really, what was his name? King, right? Yeah,
Well, he was involved.
yeah, he was involved, right, with it. Okay, so why don't we move on here? These are the variables, personal, we have performance outcomes, which include entered employment and retention and earnings, personal characteristics, which include gender, age, and a whole bunch of other things. And then we have local labor markets, which include population density and industrial structure, turnover, and a variety of things. Okay, and now we're gonna move on to behavioral insights. And here, the first behavioral insight project was concerned with our own WDA headquartered in Kalamazoo and the RESA program, the RESEA program, okay? Now, the REA program was really what this is all about, but still, it was the RESEA that eventually, after 2015, the RESEA was the, and it stood for the Reemployment Services and Eligibility Assessment Program, and the REA was the Reemployment and Eligibility Assessment, and so program. And the net impact analysis showed that the design was successful, and I'll tell you about the design in just a second. So we move on to the next slide. Now, this is basically what we did. Now, each person, each UI recipient received a letter from the state, okay, saying that you had to be there, a very litigious letter, okay? And it said you had to, you know, go there and you had to be there and you had to do all this stuff and things like that, okay? Well, we decided that what was interesting was that, why don't we just do something more personable, okay? Instead of an email that, or a letter that was very litigious, let's do something that is less litigious and has a personal and empathetic tone to it. And so soon you will receive a letter from the unemployment insurance asking you to schedule a reemployment and assessment and eligibility assessment within 14 days, okay? So that's basically the empathetic and sympathetic tone that we were talking about. And then we have the clear deadline, and then we have an emphasizes benefits of participation, where here we said all services are provided for free. I mean, there's really nothing that costs you anything, so you might as well just, you know, be part of this process instead of you know, waiting for something to be you know, to come about. Okay, and so the random trial was about 300 and 50 treatment groups, individuals in treatment groups, and then we had about the same number of people who were in the control groups. And the effects of the two measures were measured using this administrative data that I talked about, okay? And what we found was that 16% more people who received the emails were scheduling an REA session than those who weren't. And 14% completed the REA program who received compared to those who weren't, okay? So that was basically the types of programs that we were looking at here. And so another project using behavioral insights was conducted in Grand Rapids, which is an extension of what we just talked about, okay? Then the Institute partnered with the research arm of Michigan's LMI to create something like FTSS, but called it Career Explorer instead, okay? And then Brendan Nawaji, who was the head of the employment agency in Michigan, wanted FTSS for Michigan's participants, but she retired before it could happen, okay? Even though she oversaw VAPAS, which is a unfortunate name, okay? And now Chris O'Leary and Gabrielle Pepin are carry on this work in other states as well as in Michigan. And I had a grant from the Smith Richardson Foundation to look at ways to improve the overall performance of WDAs, okay? So why did I do all this? Well, I guess one reason is you can get books and book chapters and papers, and this is what we came of all this. And so there's a lot that I've done with other people, especially Chris and others. And so that's one reason. And the next reason is that it just seemed like the right thing for the Institute to do, okay? Because, we have both arms, we have the EMSD, or now the CWIS, and we also have the research side. And one side informs the other, okay, basically, where, research can say something about, the daily operations. And, we can say something about how research helps with the daily operations. And then the daily operations that then are something that we can, basically have, here, and we can have research be informed by that too. So, any questions? I guess I only left about 4 minutes for questions, but maybe there aren't too many. Yeah,
Questions in the chat?
yeah.
Well, just a comment, it seems like the work had a lot of policy implications across, not just in Michigan, but other states.
Right.
Learning whatever the lessons are.
Right.
And I mean, is that true?
Oh, that's very true, yeah. We had a lot of visitors too, who came in from various states. And with the pilot that we talked about for Work First, we had Broward County, which is one of the largest counties in the country, not only in population, but also in, size. And so that was something that, Broward County came. I think we had it at the Park Club for Broward County and other, because we didn't have any facilities here yet. And go
What was
ahead.
the comment you shared with me from Emily Duraco about monster.com?
Oh, yeah, we had monster.com too.
They stole our idea.
Yeah.
Emily goes, didn't we pay Upjohn to do this?
Right, yeah, didn't we already pay Upjohn to do this? And so she was not happy. Emily Duraco was the assistant secretary of ETA,
Yeah.
right. And so,
So we had some impact there.
oh yeah, we had some impact with her as well, yeah.
Randy,
Go ahead.
So over the many years and decades where we've been trying to innovate and basically figure out how to more effectively target services to people who would benefit from them the most,
Mhm.
have many states adopted them into their workforce provision? Or what seems to be the barrier why we and we keep innovating, we keep trying, are we learning from each time? Or are we kind of resetting because there's changes in who's administering them, and we kind of have to reinvent the wheel? Like, what do you think are the obstacles that prevent more progress from actually being implemented on the ground from these best practices that we've been learning?
We really haven't, we really haven't been moving backwards at all. You know, we've been moving forwards on these things. But it seems like, you know, even though the medical profession and all these other professions are really adopting, you know, this type of technology, the workforce system doesn't seem to be that important
To policymakers?
to policymakers, right? And so, you know, I think that's one of the reasons that we haven't seen a whole lot of, you know, money go our way, right?
So actually, I wanted to ask questions related to what Brad asked.
Yeah,
And
right.
I was gonna go back to, I know you had 4 things on the same slide,
Right,
but the Career Explorer that you had with the state of
right.
Michigan,
Mhm.
when I first arrived, that was a project that I was attending some of the meetings. I think we called it the Data for American Dream.
Right, yeah,
And
right.
it's, if I understand it correctly, you were taking what you learned in Georgia and the state of Michigan asked you, can we redo this, redo that work and then apply it to the state of Michigan?
Right,
And what I always thought very valuable is that it gave a tool for success coaches to help guide job seekers in terms of the choices they make.
mhm.
But in response to Brad's question, it's pretty early on. We haven't evaluated that one yet. Is there a potential for evaluate? Because I know it's only been going on for, I'm not Jackie, when did we implement, like a year ago or a year and a half ago?
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So it's still pretty early in terms of
Yeah.
the number of people that.
And they're Michigan is updating the IT, and it may or may not be included, but there have been lessons learned. I mean, just going through the process. So the project started when Ben Damerow got funding from DOL for us to work with the state of Michigan. Then Michigan saw an opportunity and they went to the Eric Schmidt Foundation and got extra money to do the back end of the thing
Right,
that we designed and they
Right.
implemented. And there are bits of it that are in new programs. Gabrielle and I and Aaron are working on an RESEA evaluation. That's targeted reemployment services for unemployment insurance beneficiaries. And one of the required components is customized labor market information. And our whole system is about pulling information that's specific to the background of the job seeker, the location, the prior occupation, the interest categories. So that's customized information that's in a required federally funded program. And that's a bit of the kind of system that we were way ahead of the time 25 years ago working in Georgia. So it was kind of bounded IT before AI, before AI even got accepted. It's not generational. And when it becomes generational, you get fluky results. But we learned about having to put the boundaries on more of an expert system. And it's an evolutionary process, and we've been involved. The Upjohn Institute has been
yeah,
involved.
yeah, right, right. And along with Brad's comments about, you know, are we really moving forward on this? I think, you know, the paper I wrote on the technology, you know, do we need a smarter workforce program? Has really, you know, is something that we really do need. And because, you know, nobody is, you know, even though the medical profession, which I know somewhat, is, you know, is leaps and bounds further along than the labor programs. Yeah.
So I think we have hit our hour. So
Yeah,
I
we-
want, on
okay.
behalf of everyone in
Oh,
the
Jackie.
virtual, Jackie, I'm
Jackie
sorry,
had the
go ahead.
problem.
What time frame did the Institute have an office in DC, and what was the reason to stop doing that?
Well, the office in DC was about, it was the Great Society, basically. And so when the Great Society money started drying up, you know, the board of directors here decided that maybe we should just put everything, you know, in one area.
So that was
Okay.
the Lyndon Johnson era. From
That was
the
Lyn-
mid-60s to the mid-70s.
Right,
And actually, that's when Saul Blaustein came from DC
right,
to
to
Michigan.
Michigan, yeah.
That
All those
pre-planned, yeah.
social policies wound down in like 1969.
Yeah,
1970. I
mhm.
don't know how long the office held on.
We stayed until about 70.
74. I think it
Or,
was.
yeah.
To
something
share
like
Saul
that.
Blaustein's book with everyone, there is a free PDF available in the IR.
Yeah,
The first 40 years of
Yeah.
Institute policy.
but that's right, Jackie, yeah, so if you don't, yeah. Mhm.
So Randy, thank you very much on behalf of the folks on virtual.